Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Dom's Daily Sports. I'm your host Dom, and before we get into this video, please do me a solid and go down below, subscribe to this channel, like this video, turn on notifications so you don't miss any juicy videos that we come out with in the future. In today's video, we're here today to discuss the Pittsburgh Steelers offseason recap. In this video, we're going to go over a few things on the Pittsburgh Steelers. First, we're going to go over their recap of their 2019 season. Next, we're going to go over the Steelers free agents and who they have, whose contracts are going to be expired. Next, we're going to talk about contract talks, basically people that are big names that they need to look at paying this year. Then next, we're going to look at free agent targets. After that, we'll look at targets in the draft. And then we'll look forward to the 2020 season of what we think the Steelers will do. So first, let's talk about the 2019 season for the Steelers. In 2019, the Steelers went 8-8 and finished second in the AFC North. This year was basically, it was done before it even started. First game of the year, we get blown out by the Patriots, just demolished. And everybody was thinking, wow, the Steelers they're really going to miss Antonio Brown. Then second game of the season, guess what happens? Ben Roethlisberger, the star quarterback, gets hurt. Now this season looked like it was a lost cause. It looked like the Steelers had a chance at maybe getting a top 5 pick this year. But after having a mediocre season, the Steelers decided, you know what, let's trade the first round pick. And they went after the star safety Minkah Fitzpatrick from the Miami Dolphins. After trading for Minkah Fitzpatrick, their season really turned around, and the Steelers were really able to show how good their defense was this year. Going 8-8 this season was actually a pretty big surprise. The offense had to be probably one of the worst offenses in the league, led by 2 QBs, Devlin Hodgins and Mason Rudolph, and basically no big performances on offense. Juju having an underperformance season, hampered by injuries. Same with James Connor. Basically a lot of young players on offense, just nothing to go on the offense. It was all on the defense is what really happened last year. Having big seasons by TJ Watt, Joe Hayden, Minkah Fitzpatrick, Bud Dupree, who else? There's a lot of names on the defense, and what a great season, and it's something to really look forward to with the Steelers. So now that we got that out of the way, let's move on to the actual free agents that the Steelers are going to have in 2020. The first big name to look at is Bud Dupree. Now, Bud Dupree in the past seasons looked like he was a bust. It looked like the guy was just couldn't get it done. He was a first-round bust, and it was time for the Steelers to move on. But with the pressure being put on him with his expiring contract, Bud Dupree ended up having a career year, racking up 11.5 sacks. Bud Dupree really showed that he could be the co-star to TJ Watt, and those two could be really lethal on the edge. So with this season, with Bud Dupree contract being up, I think the Steelers really need to pay the man. Not like a record-breaking deal, not something big, not something like really expensive, but the man should be paid. I think the Steelers should definitely move on with him. He has speed, he has strength, he has versatile. He's a really good player that the Steelers should hold on to for the future and should pair along with TJ Watt. The next player that the Steelers have is Vance McDonald. Now, Vance McDonald's 2019 season was pretty lackluster. The Steelers ended up trading for Nick Van Nett from the Seahawks because Vance McDonald just kept getting hurt. They couldn't trust him to stay on the field. And I think the Steelers need to move on from Vance McDonald. He's got the skills, but he's just so inconsistent. He's old, he gets injured, and the Steelers need to move on and need to go young at tight end. They've had too much age. They got rid of the only young player they had in Jesse James, which I thought was a mistake to get rid of. And they kept Vance McDonald, who is more skilled than Jesse James, don't get me wrong. But Vance McDonald is just way too old. They need to move on from him, and they need to go young again. And now the final player to look at is Shawn Davis. Now, Shawn Davis didn't do anything in the 2019 season. He ended up being put on the IR and just was not able to do anything. So with Shawn Davis, this is a really tough decision. Like, one thing you have to look at is how much is it going to cost you to keep him. That's the big question. If you can get him on a small contract where you're not having to pay too much, then he might be something to look at. But if you're having to pay him a decent amount and he thinks that he's worth something, then it's a hard time keeping him. I think you got to move on. But the thing is that the Steelers are already good at safety. They have two good safeties. I mean, they have Minkah Fitzpatrick, who is an elite, and they have Terrell Edmunds, who is young, who hasn't been insanely good, but he is progressing and is getting better week after week. But the one good thing about bringing Shawn Davis back, if they're able to get him on a good deal, is if they can have him compete with Terrell Edmunds. Edmunds is still young and he needs competition. If you give the man the starting position and just hand it to him, there's a chance that either A, he could go up and he could rise up to the expectations, or he could fall off, just like how Artie Burns did. So I think bringing back Shawn Davis on a minimum deal would be a very good idea for the Steelers for competition in the safety position. So those were the three names that I labeled off. There was a few others, but they're not really big names. Like you had Javon Hargrave, who I think they should look at keeping. You had Artie Burns, who they definitely should get rid of. The man has been a bust, and they should move on from him. But those were the three big names to kind of look at. Now, with the Steelers, they have a lot of things that they got to look at in this offseason when it comes to contract talks. They have three huge key players to their teams that their contracts are on one-year deals, and they might look at extending this offseason. The first is none other than the man, T.J. Watt. Now, T.J. Watt just came off of a career year and was in the nominees for Defensive Player of the Year and absolutely just wreaked havoc in the coverage, wreaked havoc in the backfield, getting fumbles, interceptions, sacks, tackle for losses. The man has been a beast. He's just like his brother, and I mean, it's a no-brainer. The Steelers need to pay him this offseason. They need to give him a good contract, and they need to show him the money. Don't get rid of him. Show him the money. Show him that Steeler Nation really wants him to stay. Now, the next player, well, actually two players, I'm actually going to combine both of them, is Juju and Connor. Now, these were the two young players that the Steelers really looked at for moving on. Last season, the Steelers moved on from Le'Veon Bell and Antonio Brown from various situations, with Brown wanting to be out and Bell just wanting a new contract. So with that happening, the Steelers really looked at Juju and Connor to step up and be the next big stars on offense with Ben Roethlisberger. But they had a pretty lackluster season. With Connor, I mean, he showed some glimpses of some good games, but he just keeps getting injured, has not been durable, and he's had some troubles with getting explosive plays in some games. Now with Juju, the man is really good at catching. He's really good at route running. He's a really good receiver, but the thing is that it seems like he just can't make the big play when it matters the most in the fourth quarter. He's struggled a little bit, but he is still a really good receiver in this NFL. Now with both of these players, I think you have to wait on both of them. You shouldn't pay him yet. I think both of them you should wait on, because if you pay him big right now and they do the same thing next year, you're going to regret it. So with Juju and Connor, I think they should definitely look at waiting until next year and give them a prove-it year for them to prove that they deserve the money. Now, after that, let's move on to the free agents' targets. Now, with the Steelers this year, they don't have a lot of cap. Like, they're projected to only have $1.4 million. Now, they could get et cetera, if they were to release some players and get more cap. But they don't really have a lot of cap to work with, so there wasn't really a lot of players I can look at. But there was one player that kind of popped up that I was like, pretty interesting. And that man, I think, would be Tyler Eifert. Now, I know that he's been struggling. I know he's had his injuries. But the thing about Tyler Eifert is he still has the traits to be a good tight end. He just has to get past the injuries. And with him having, 2 to 3 lackluster seasons, I think with injuries, I think the Steelers should definitely look at if they can get him on a cheap deal to bring him in, give him competition with whoever we draft or whoever we decide to get in free agency besides him. And they should definitely see if he can return back to his elite self. Because if he could, he'd be a really good player on the Steelers offense and could be elite. Now let's move on to the targets in the draft. Now there are 3 players to look at when the Steelers are drafting. Now the Steelers don't have a first round pick, so there's not a lot of big players we can look at like Chase Young, Tua, Joe Burrow, and et cetera, all these big players. So really when you look at it, you kind of got to look at the late rounds, or basically maybe the Steelers could make a move, but the Steelers don't really do a lot. They did last year, but I don't see the Steelers unloading a lot just to be able to move up into the first round. But with that being said, the first player I think the Steelers should definitely look at is Bryson Hopkins. He's a tight end, really young, really good at route running, has really good hands, very versatile, and he looks like a really good tight end that the Steelers should look at getting, who could be a late first round talent but could sneak into the second round. Now, the one thing that he does lack, though, is his blocking ability. He's not really a great blocking tight end. But the thing about the Steelers is that they run so many tight end sets. Like, there's times where we'll have 2 to 3 tight ends on the field at the same time. So I think he'll definitely be able to make up for that with his route running ability and with him helping in the passing game, which the Steelers definitely need in the tight end position. Now, the next guy I think the Steelers got to look at is Isaiah Hodgins from Oregon. He's a receiver. I think the Steelers should look at least drafting 1 receiver this year. They do have a lot of receivers on their team. They got James Washington, Ryan Switzer, Juju, Deontay Johnson, James Washington. But I think they should definitely look at getting a receiver in this late rounds. The Steelers have a history of being able to draft late receivers and make them blossom, and they need to bring in some competition. The receivers just did not step up last year. That was our main problem. They weren't getting open when we needed them. Deontay Johnson did show some signs of some greatness. Same with James Washington. Did show some signs that they could be good. But I think Isaiah Hodgins should be a player to look at. He'd be a late round gem. He's 6'4", which the Steelers need some size. They don't have a lot of tall receivers. Juju is little tall, but they need some more size. James Washington, Deontay, Ryan, they are all really short. And another thing about him is he's really versatile. He can really jump up. He has good hands. Now, the one thing to look at, I mean, it's not really a negative, but something to look at, is he is 209 pounds for 6'4", so he could come off as lanky and could have troubles with getting hit at the line with his route running and creating separation in the NFL, because it is a little different from college. But I think going to the Steelers, they could really help him gain some weight, gain some mass, and I think he could blossom as a top receiver for the Steelers and help go alongside with Juju Smith-Schuster. Now, with the third pick, this is kind of a little bit strange. It's a little sneaky pick. Now, if the Steelers were to look up to basically trade up a little bit, I think this is one player to definitely look at. Now, the Steelers, with their QB position, struggled a lot last season. Devlin Hodges he had some signs, but man, he struggled. Same with Mason, and it's like, we look at Ben, he is coming back, and he is going to be our starter, and he is a good QB. But what happens if he gets injured again? Are we just going to have a repeat of last season and just give up? I think the Steelers should look at drafting this guy, Jalen Hertz. I think Jalen Hertz would be an excellent choice if the Steelers can somehow pull it off and get him. He does have a less than ideal arm for the NFL, but he's a really good leader and has excellent mobility and came off a really good season of around 50 touchdown passes and only 8 interceptions. I think he'd be a really great addition for the Steelers to get in the second round or trade up to get, because there's a lot of good QBs in this draft, and I think there's a chance that Jalen could fall to the Steelers. So I really hope the Steelers do look at him, because I think that would be a really good future player for the Steelers to make the successor for Big Ben. Now that we're done with the offseason, let's look forward to next season. Basically, 3 questions to look at with the Steelers in next season and their expectations are, the first is Big Ben's health. Big Ben went into this last season basically in a prove-it year, with Antonio Brown not being there, Le'Veon Bell not being there, and with him in a whole new offense to show that he is the reason why the Steelers were so successful on offense. But the thing is, though, is that did not last that long. He got injured in the second game against the Seahawks in like the first quarter, and his season was already over by then. He had surgery on his elbow, but one good news that came up is that he should be able to throw around training camp time and should be ready for the 2020 regular season. So that will definitely be one thing to look at. The next thing to look at is who's going to step up on this offense. The Steelers could bring in a lot of guys in free agency or in the draft, but if they don't make any big splashes, the Steelers really need someone to step up on this offense, especially at the receiver position. They need someone to step up and show that they can be the number 2 besides Juju. Because Juju is obviously going to be our number 1. I don't see the Steelers going after a receiver that could be better. So I think Juju is definitely going to be the number 1, but we need a number 2. I think one guy that could step up who could be good is Deontay Johnson, but we will see. I mean, he showed some signs, but got to be consistent every week. And the third thing to look at is, can this defense repeat? Can they repeat their success that they did last year? If it weren't for the defense last year, the Steelers probably would have been a 3-13 or a 4-12 team. So going into this next season, if Big Ben can stay healthy, if they can get a few pieces on offense and the offense can get back to a top 15, if this defense can look to repeat and be another great defense next year, look out for the Steelers because they're going to be a really lethal team to look at. Now, the thing about the Steelers, my expectations and my prediction is I think they are going to finish second in the AFC North with a 10-6 record right behind Baltimore, who I think will finish around a 12-4 record. But I think the Steelers will get a wild card spot, so we will see. But with that being said, thank you guys for tuning into this video. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Like this video if you enjoyed, and comment down below any ideas you guys would love to see in the future videos. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and tune in next time.